He is absolutely the most ruthless man I've ever seen. Single-handedly, he can repel 100,000 eagles. He moves like a ghost, transforming into a swarm of bats during battle, charging into the fray. After the fight, he hangs the bodies of his enemies high, instilling fear in others. Thus, he earned the nickname Impaler. He is the infamous Dracula. Everyone knows he is the progenitor of vampires, but few know his past and present. Dracula was originally a prince of a small country. Without his own army, he was constantly bullied by the Sultanate. Even the envoys of the other side could disregard him as a king. The Sultan demanded Dracula hand over 1,000 boys as tribute and also required his son as a hostage. No matter how humbly Dracula pleaded, it was to no avail. In the end, for the sake of peace, Dracula chose to compromise, but at the last moment, he regretted it. He told his son to run back, while he grabbed the envoy's sword and dealt with him in one strike. In front of Dracula, the soldiers were powerless. His actions also meant officially declaring war on the Sultan. But although Dracula's personal combat power was off the charts, he was ultimately no match for the Sultan's 100,000 troops. In despair, Dracula recalled the records in ancient books. They mentioned a vampire with demonic power hidden on the cliff mountain for 1,000 years. Due to the fear of sunlight, it could only stay in the cave forever. Now, Dracula must obtain the demonic power to resolve this crisis. With a glimmer of hope, he arrived at the cliff mountain. In a dark cave, Dracula indeed found the legendary demon. The demon cut open its arm, filled the skull with blood, and said that drinking it would make him as fast as a shooting star, with super healing abilities, becoming the ruler of the night. But the price was an insatiable thirst for human blood, and eventually, even his closest loved ones would die by his hand. If he could resist drinking human blood for 3 days, he would revert to his original form, but his power would be greatly weakened. After a moment of struggle, Dracula drank the demon's blood in one gulp. Soon, Dracula collapsed to the ground, and his consciousness began to emerge. But unexpectedly, it awakened his bloodthirsty side. Looking at the veins on his wife's neck, Dracula almost bit down. He struggled to control himself, turned, and ran into the woods, suppressing his urge to feed. But just then, a beggar suddenly appeared. The beggar seemed to know the secret of Dracula's vampire identity. He directly pulled out a knife, cut his palm, and offered his blood to Dracula. But Dracula knocked the chess pieces over with one swipe. Afterward, Dracula returned home, his whole body trembling. His wife noticed his abnormality. The scar on his injured back miraculously disappeared. Under his wife's questioning, Dracula reluctantly confessed that he had made a pact with a demon. If he could endure for 3 days, he would return to normal. However, he couldn't move in the sunlight during the day. Dracula had to let his wife and subjects go ahead while he stayed behind under the pretense of scouting. He only moved after nightfall. On the escape route, the advancing group was ambushed by enemy troops. The defenseless subjects were no match for the fully armed soldiers and could only be slaughtered. Just as his wife was about to be killed, Dracula appeared like a ghost and saved his wife and child, but because of this, the fact that Dracula had become a monster was quickly discovered. People knew, and the beggar found Dracula again. In front of your people, what did the legend say you became? You still can. The beggar suddenly slashed the curtains, exposing Dracula to the sunlight. Now, all his subjects confirmed that their king was indeed a monster. The subjects even wanted to burn him to death. The room was instantly set ablaze. Dracula was trapped in the raging fire. At this moment, a mysterious black smoke appeared in the sky. Dracula walked out of the fire. Is this your loyalty? Your gratitude? You fools. How ironic this moment was. He abandoned his conscience and soul for the country, yet his subjects treated him as a monster and wanted to burn him. Countered. Then, Dracula gathered his palm into a large fist and slammed it onto the ground. The Sultan's army was as fragile as paper, easily defeated. Then, Dracula transformed into a bat, teleported to the battlefield, knocked the Sultan off his horse, intending to capture him and force a retreat. However, he discovered it was just a decoy. He instantly realized that the 100,000 troops before him were merely a distraction, but he didn't realize that his home was being invaded. The Sultan had secretly sent men to infiltrate the church, putting his wife and child in grave danger. A soldier punched his wife in the stomach and almost kicked her off. His wife pleaded desperately not to harm the child. At this moment, Dracula finally heard his wife's cry for help. He instantly transformed into a bat and rushed back to rescue, but he was still too late. His wife couldn't hold on and fell off the cliff. He immediately transformed into a bat and dove down. But even with his immense power, he could only watch as she fell. Seeing the approaching sunrise, his wife knew Dracula's powers would soon vanish. In her final moments, she asked Dracula to drink her blood. Because their son had been captured by the enemy and needed him to rescue him, Dracula hesitated, but for his son, he painfully obliged his wife's request. Thus, the kind king who loved peace was completely gone. A powerful vampire progenitor was born. He set out with a heart full of rage to seek revenge on the Sultan. At this moment, the Sultan would never have imagined that it wasn't just Dracula coming for him, but his entire vampire army. He shared his blood with his dying subjects, turning them into new vampires, and led them to massacre the Sultan's forces. Later, Dracula found the Sultan. The Sultan had filled his tent with silver coins in advance. Under the suppression of the silver, Dracula's demonic powers were weakened. The Sultan forced him into a perilous situation. Just as the weapon was about to pierce his heart, Dracula transformed into a specter and pierced the Sultan. Seeing his now mindless subjects, he knew that the existence of vampires would spread like a plague, bringing endless chaos. So, he dispersed the clouds, and the intense sunlight shone upon them, turning the vampires to ashes instantly. Dracula also fell at that moment. But it's said that Dracula didn't die. He was resurrected by his servant with fresh blood, granting him eternal life. Rumor has it, he lives among us. Have you ever suspected that your friend who stays up the latest might be Dracula? Alright, I'm Lin Bei. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like and follow. See you next time.